name is Sarah Bennett, and I'm 15 years old. I live in a small town in Minnesota where nothing exciting ever really happens. Our school, Maple Ridge High, is the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, or so I thought. It was a chilly Tuesday morning, and I was stuck in my least favorite class, history. Our regular teacher, Mr. Wilkins, was out sick, so we had a substitute. He introduced himself as Mr. Ellis, a man in his late 40s with a patchy beard, glasses that kept slipping down his nose, and a smile that felt off. Something about him made my skin crawl. He was overly friendly, but in a way that felt fake, like he was trying too hard. The day started normally, with Mr. Ellis rambling about the Civil War and assigning us a worksheet. Then, about halfway through class, the intercom crackled to life. Attention. We are now under lockdown. This is not a drill. Please secure your classrooms and remain silent. The room fell silent. My classmates looked at each other, wide-eyed. A lockdown wasn't unheard of. We'd practiced them before. But the principal's tone this time was different. It was shaky, almost panicked. Mr. Ellis didn't miss a beat. He walked to the door, locked it, and pulled down the blinds. His movements were calm, almost too calm, like he had done this 100 times before. "Okay, everyone," he said, clapping his hands together. "Under your desks. Stay quiet and don't move." We obeyed, scrambling under our desks. My heart was pounding, and I could feel the tension in the air. Some kids were already whispering, trying to guess what was happening. "Shut up," Mr. Ellis snapped, his voice suddenly harsh. The way he said it sent chills down my spine. I tried to focus on staying calm, but then I noticed something strange. While we were all hiding, Mr. Ellis was on his phone. At first, I thought he was texting the office or maybe the police, but then I caught a glimpse of his screen as he turned slightly. The message he typed said, "They're all in here." My stomach dropped. What did that mean? Who was he texting? My hands started shaking, and I had to bite my lip to stop myself from gasping. I glanced around the room to see if anyone else noticed, but they were all too focused on staying quiet. A few minutes later, we heard footsteps in the hallway, heavy, deliberate, and getting closer. Whoever it was, they weren't in a hurry. It sounded like they wanted to be heard. The doorknob rattled. My heart felt like it was going to explode. Mr. Ellis stood up and walked to the door. He didn't say anything, just stared at it like he was waiting for something. The rattling stopped, and the footsteps moved away. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Mr. Ellis started texting again. I couldn't see what he was writing this time, but the way his fingers moved so quickly made my chest tighten. Then the footsteps came back. This time, they were running. Whoever it was slammed into the door, trying to force it open. Some of the kids in my class whimpered or gasped. Mr. Ellis turned to us, putting a finger to his lips, but his calm demeanor was gone. He looked nervous. The intruder pounded on the door again, harder this time. I could hear someone muttering outside, though I couldn't make out the words. Mr. Ellis didn't move to call for help or do anything to protect us. He just stood there, frozen. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, we heard shouting down the hall, police officers yelling commands. The pounding on the door stopped, replaced by the sound of a struggle. Mr. Ellis sat down at the desk, his hands shaking. He didn't look at us, didn't say a word. After what felt like forever, there was a knock at the door. "Police, open up." Mr. Ellis hesitated. Then, slowly, he unlocked the door. Several officers stormed in, guns drawn. They ordered Mr. Ellis to the ground, cuffing him right there in front of us. One of the officers turned to us and said, "You're safe now. It's over." It turned out the intruder was an armed man who had been trying to get into our classroom. And Mr. Ellis, he wasn't just a substitute teacher, he was working with the intruder. The police found messages on his phone detailing their plan. The door's reinforced lock had been the only thing keeping the intruder out. To this day, I can't shake the image of Mr. Ellis sitting at his desk, texting while we hid under ours. He wasn't there to protect us. He was part of the danger. I don't know what would have happened if the police hadn't arrived when they did, but I do know one thing. I'll never feel completely safe at school again. My name is Mia Thompson, and I'm 16 years old. I live in a quiet suburb in Ohio, where life is usually uneventful. Our town is small, the kind of place where the biggest news is a bake sale or a football game. I go to Crestwood High, and though I'm not a big fan of school, I love the music room. It's my safe space, where I can get lost in the sound of the piano or sing without worrying about anything else. But now, when I think about the music room, all I feel is fear. It happened on a regular Thursday. We were in music class, laughing and practicing for the upcoming recital. Mr. Hanley, our teacher, was guiding us through a tricky harmony when the loudspeaker crackled to life. Attention. Lockdown. This is not a drill. Lockdown immediately. The room went silent. For a second, I thought it was a drill. We'd had one just last month, and they always came with the same instructions. Lock the door, turn off the lights, and hide. But the voice on the speaker wasn't calm this time. It was rushed, almost panicked. Mr. Hanley's face changed instantly. He told us to stay quiet, lock the door, and shut off the lights. Get behind the instruments, stay low, and don't make a sound, he whispered. We moved quickly, squeezing behind the piano, drum set, and shelves full of sheet music. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. Then Mr. Hanley did something strange. He grabbed his keys and said, "Stay here. I need to check on the classroom next door." Before anyone could stop him, he slipped out the door. We waited in silence, huddled together in the dark. Seconds turned into minutes, and Mr. Hanley didn't come back. My friend Emma, who was crouched next to me, whispered, "Why isn't he back yet?" I didn't have an answer. Then we heard it, a loud bang echoing down the hall. A gunshot. Someone gasped, and I clamped my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. My mind raced. Was Mr. Hanley okay? Was someone in the school with a gun? The sound of running footsteps snapped me back to reality. They were coming closer, heavy and fast, like whoever it was knew exactly where they were going. I held my breath as the footsteps stopped right outside the music room. The doorknob rattled. "Open up," a man's voice shouted. "I know you're in there." Emma grabbed my hand, her nails digging into my skin. No one moved. No one made a sound. The man pounded on the door again, harder this time. "Don't make me break it down," he yelled. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying he would go away. After what felt like forever, the loudspeaker crackled again. This time, it was the police. "This is the police. The building is surrounded. Drop your weapon and come out with your hands up." The man cursed loudly. Then we heard him running down the hall. For a moment, we didn't move. Then Emma whispered, "I think he's gone." We stayed hidden until we heard the police banging on our door, calling out to us. Mr. Hanley's spare key was still in the lock, so they were able to open it quickly. "Is everyone okay?" one of the officers asked, shining a flashlight into the room. We nodded, tears streaming down our faces. It wasn't until later that we learned what had happened. The intruder was a man in his late 20s, looking for a specific student he believed had wronged him. He wasn't targeting our class. He had gone to the wrong room. Mr. Hanley had tried to protect the students in the next classroom when he encountered the gunman. He managed to lock their door, but was shot in the hallway before he could return to us. The thought that we were only spared because of a mistake haunted me for weeks. If the gunman had known we were in the music room, if the police had arrived just a few minutes later, well, I don't even want to think about it. Mr. Hanley survived, but he'll never teach again. The bullet shattered part of his shoulder, leaving him unable to play the piano. I still go to the music room, but it doesn't feel the same every time I sit at the piano. I remember the sound of that gunshot, the man's voice yelling at us, and Mr. Hanley's bravery. They call it a tragedy narrowly avoided, but for me, it's something that will never stop replaying in my mind. I used to love music because it made me feel safe. Now, I'm not sure I'll ever feel safe again. My name is Ethan Carter, and I'm 15 years old. I live in a small town in Pennsylvania, where life is usually quiet and predictable. I go to Ridgeview High, a pretty average school with its cliques, drama, and all that. Gym class is my least favorite part of the day. I'm not athletic, and the smell of sweaty socks never seems to go away. But what happened during one gym period changed everything I thought I knew about feeling safe at school. It started like any other day. We were playing basketball, and Coach Miller was shouting his usual commands. Hustle, move it, that kind of thing. Then, out of nowhere, the intercom crackled on. Attention, this is a lockdown. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. Lockdown immediately. The gym fell silent. At first, some of us thought it was a joke or another practice drill, but the tone in the principal's voice was different, urgent, almost shaky. Coach Miller didn't waste any time. He told us to stop what we were doing and stay quiet. He locked the gym doors, turned off the lights, and motioned for us to get under the bleachers. Stay low, don't make a sound, he whispered. The gym was huge, with glass windows along one wall. Even with the lights off, I felt completely exposed. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows on the polished floor. My chest tightened as I crawled under the bleachers with the rest of the class. We sat there in the silence, listening. At first, there was nothing, just the faint hum of the air conditioning. Then we heard it, footsteps echoing down the hall. They were heavy, deliberate, and getting closer. I held my breath, every muscle in my body tense. The sound stopped right outside the gym doors. The doorknob rattled. Someone was trying to get in. My heart felt like it was going to explode. A few girls next to me were trembling, one of them silently crying. Coach Miller crouched nearby, staring at the door with this intense look on his face, like he was ready to jump into action if he had to. The doorknob rattled again, harder this time. Whoever it was started pounding on the door, shouting something we couldn't quite make out. Then there was silence. For a moment, I thought whoever it was had given up and left. But then came the sound of breaking glass. I flinched as shards of glass from one of the gym windows shattered onto the floor. Someone outside was smashing their way in. My breath caught in my throat. The sound of glass crunching under heavy boots sent chills down my spine. I could see the shadow of a man moving near the broken window. Stay down, Coach Miller mouthed to us. The man didn't come in though. Maybe he was spooked by the alarms that had started blaring or the faint sound of sirens in the distance. He stood outside for a moment, pacing before disappearing from view. We stayed frozen under the bleachers, not daring to move. The sirens grew louder, and soon we heard the sound of police officers shouting orders. After what felt like an eternity, the gym doors burst open, and a group of officers stormed in. Is everyone okay? One of them asked, his flashlight scanning the room. Coach Miller nodded, his face pale but calm. They didn't get in, he said. We were escorted out of the gym in a single file, still shaking. As we walked down the hall, I caught a glimpse of the broken window and the trail of glass leading to the parking lot. Later, we learned what had happened. The intruder was a parent furious over his child's suspension. He'd managed to bypass security by entering through a side door left propped open by a careless student. He had been wandering the school, looking for the principal's office when the lockdown was called. He never made it inside the gym, but the thought that he could have, that he was so close, haunts me. Now, every time I walk into that gym, I feel a chill. The windows have been replaced and the security measures tightened, but I can't forget the sound of those footsteps, the breaking glass, and the sheer helplessness I felt hiding under the bleachers. School was supposed to be a safe place, but after that day, I realized that safety is something you can't take for granted. It can be shattered as easily as a pane of glass.